India and Russia are moving to reinforce trade and energy cooperation, even as renewed calls for a Ukraine ceasefire and pressure from the United States President Donald Trump for Prime Minister Narendra Modi to scale back ties with Moscow intensify. The diplomatic maneuver reflects India's determination to defend its strategic autonomy at a time when global power blocks are hardening and major economies are being pressed to choose sides. As India deepens its partnership with Russia while managing U.S. expectations, how long can India balance these competing demands without reshaping its global posture? These and more will be explored in today's Flash News. Good afternoon and welcome. I am Thabito Arko. Let's begin. Russian President Vladimir Putin met Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi in New Delhi on Friday, marking his first visit to India since the start of the Ukraine war. The talk centered on energy supplies, trade expansion, and the impact of U.S. sanctions on India's purchases of Russian oil. Putin was received with full state honors, including a mounted guard and a 21-gun salute at the presidential palace before proceeding to the Mahatma Gandhi Memorial to lay a wreath. Both leaders then moved to Hyderabad House for closed-door discussions expected to last 2 hours, followed by public statement. Let's take a look. You can see a real show of collaboration and partnership. That was a warm hug by the Prime Minister of India, the President of India, Narendra Modi, and Russian President Vladimir Putin. A cultural show right there now. We see the energy corporation dominated early remarks. Putin said Russia would maintain steady supplies of oil, gas, and coal to support India's fast-growing economy. Moscow also announced that several agreements had been signed to deepen economic and strategic ties. Now, Modi said India and Russia had finalized a program to expand and diversify bilateral trade through 2030, and we're pushing for an early conclusion of a free trade agreement with the Eurasian Economic Union. We see that the two leaders also endorsed plans to strengthen industrial, technology, defense, and labor mobility cooperation. The talks unfolded as India's imports of Russian oil are projected to hit a 3-year low this month amid tightening Western sanctions. New Delhi has come under pressure from the United States, which argues that cheap Russian crude helps fund the war in Ukraine. Washington has already imposed a punitive 25% tariff and a wide range of Indian export. Now, despite this, Russia remains India's largest oil supplier. State refiners such as Indian Oil Corp continue sourcing from non-sanctioned entities, while Bharat Petroleum is negotiating new orders. Private refiner Nayara Energy is operating almost entirely on Russian crude, and Reliance Industries plans to process new Russian cargoes at its domestic-focused facility. This is what we are seeing. Russia is also seeking India's support to expand local fuel sales through Nayara and raise refinery capacity use. Meanwhile, Spark Bank has offered rupee-denominated financing tools to boost Russian export to India, signaling Moscow's push to adjust trade flows to sanctions. This is what is happening against President Donald Trump's push for India to withdraw partnership with Russia since the war in Ukraine began. Now, we'll see that the Ukraine conflict also featured prominently. Modi reiterated India's position in favor of peace and urged a return to dialogue, while Putin briefed him on ongoing engagement with the United States and other partners regarding a possible deal and settlement. Now, we'll see that the Kremlin said it was awaiting Washington's response after talks earlier this week involving U.S. envoys David Koff and Jared Kushner. Now, let's take a look. Vladimir Putin made a statement right there with Indian president. Let's take a listen.
Уважаемый господин премьер-министр, дорогие друзья, прежде всего спасибо большое за приглашение.
Господин президент, сегодня весь день мы будем разговаривать.
У нас была возможность, и дали мне такую возможность подробно рассказать о том, что происходит на как раз украинском направлении, и что нами предпринимается совместно с некоторыми другими партнерами, в том числе с Соединенными Штатами, по вопросу возможного мирного урегулирования этого кризиса. Спасибо вам за это внимание и спасибо за ваши усилия, направленные на разрешение.
The New Delhi summit comes a day after French President Emmanuel Macron urged China to increase pressure on Russia during the meetings in Beijing, underscoring growing international effort to influence global positions on the Ukraine war. More announcements are expected as the leaders wrap up their bilateral talks and unveil the full list of agreements reached. Let's get right into the report and how does the meeting unfold. We see the Chinese President Xi Jinping hosted French President Emmanuel Macron on an unusual sightseeing trip to Chengdu on Friday, underscoring Beijing's strategic focus on Paris as it navigates tense relations with European Union. Xi rarely accompanies foreign leaders outside Beijing, a gesture that signals China's efforts to cultivate France as a key EU partner. Even during U.S. President Donald Trump's high-profile 2017 visit, events were largely confined to the Chinese capital. Meanwhile, Macron's fourth state visit to China, however, has so far yielded limited commercial or even political breakthroughs. Analysts say Beijing's tight negotiating space amid parallel trade discussions with Washington and Brussels has curtailed its ability to offer Paris significant concessions. The French leader began his day with an early morning jog around Chengdu's Qingcheng Lake Park before joining Xi at the Dujiangyan irrigation site, a UNESCO World Heritage Landmark. Investors now are watching whether the high visibility thaw will translate into firm deals or easing of EU-China trade tensions, especially in the midst of Ukraine war. Chief executives from major French companies are part of Macron's delegation. A Beijing meeting on Thursday produced 12 cooperation agreements across areas including population aging, nuclear energy, and panda conservation, but no major commercial commitment or disclosed financial value. Analysts say Paris expected more. France has been pushing Europe's economic security agenda and believed its leverage could unlock Chinese offers on trade or investment. Now, see that expectation has not materialized. Macron nevertheless gained a public relations boost during a visit to Sikyong University, where students crowded around him before his remarks on global political shifts and the need for renewed multilateral cooperation. However, Beijing's outreach to France is part of a broader strategy to strengthen influence within the 27-member bloc. Yet Chinese officials are cautious about deals that might weaken their negotiating position with the US or even the European Union. Now, see that a long-anticipated 500-jet Airbus purchase is unlikely to be finalized during the visit, as such a move could undermine China's leverage with Washington, which is pressing Beijing for new Boeing orders. That's on one side. Now, see that China is also not expected to ease duties affecting French cognac producers or restrictions on pork imports, as both issues are central to the EU's ongoing tariff dispute over Chinese-made electric vehicles. Nor is Xi positioned to offer France progress on the war in Ukraine, with Beijing reaffirming alignment with Moscow in recent months. Let's take a look.
On the crisis in Ukraine, China supports all efforts towards peace. We hope that the different parties can, through dialogue, find a peace agreement that is fair, lasting, and acceptable to all parties concerned. China will continue to play a constructive role in solving this crisis via political means, but we strongly oppose all irresponsible discriminatory accusations.
China continues to reaffirm its commitment to brokering a peace between Russia and Ukraine. Meanwhile, recent European visits, including those by Spain's King Felipe IV and Germany's finance minister, have similarly ended with symbolic gestures rather than concrete gains. Chinese policy advisors say Beijing believes the EU is under increasing pressure from US economic policies and will eventually seek more reciprocal trade with China. They argue that Brussels should reconsider its approach, particularly on issues linking China policy to Russia's war in Ukraine.
Emmanuel Macron that we have the measure of the gravity of the situation and the necessity to have a robust and lasting peace. You know that France is engaged in this, and I hope we can reinforce our cooperation on this. As permanent members of the UN Security Council, we have particular responsibility, and we have to do everything so that compromises are found and that international law is maintained and long-term stability returns.
The split among EU members over electric vehicle tariffs reflects the difficulty of forging a unified European stance. France supported the duties, while Germany, whose car makers have strong ties with China, opposed them. Beijing has continued to raise the prospect of a trade deal with various EU member states, despite the EU's decision to freeze work on a broader investment pact in 2021. It did not raise the issue directly with Macron, however. EU officials maintain that Brussels has no current plans to restart trade agreement negotiations with China. That this is the situation right there at the summit. Moving ahead and bringing you over to a new development with the United States. The United States is preparing to broaden the number of countries covered by its travel ban to more than 30. U.S. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem said on Thursday. Noem made a comment in a Fox News interview when asked whether President Donald Trump's administration planned to raise the number of affected countries to 32. She did not specify the final figure or identify which countries could be added. Now, in an in-house meeting at the White House, Security Secretary, she made a statement. Let's take a listen.
Well, Mr. President, thank you for giving me a very interesting job. Some days it's a little controversial too, but it's been an honor to work for you. You are a great American. the fights that you pick are the right fights, and they're always on behalf of this country. So I appreciate the chance to do this job heading up this department. If you think about what Joe Biden did with the Department of Homeland Security, he used this department to invade the country with terrorists. He opened up the borders, let anybody come in that wanted to. He put them on airplanes. He let them through our airports. If they could figure out a way to get to our shores and in our country, he just opened the door and invited them in. So it's our job to get them out. And I want to thank you for this team, because I look around the table and I think every single person here has helped me do my job over the last year.
The United States currently bans citizens of 12 countries from entry and restricts travel from 7 others under a June proclamation aimed at tightening national security. The measures apply to both immigrants and non-immigrants, including tourists, students, and business visitors. The potential expansion comes as the administration intensifies its migration controls following the shooting of 2 National Guard members in Washington, D.C. last week. Authorities say the suspected attacker was an Afghan national who entered the United States in 2021 through a resettlement program that officials now argue lacked sufficient vetting. Richards previously reported that the administration was weighing restrictions on citizens of 36 additional countries, according to an internal State Department cable. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump has ordered a wide-range review of asylum decisions made under former President Joe Biden and a reassessment of green cards issued to citizens of 19 countries. He has also vowed to permanently pause migration from what he described as third world countries, though he did not define the term. Since taking office in January, Trump has made immigration enforcement a priority, deploying federal agents to major cities, tightening border controls, and accelerating deportations. Efforts to overhaul legal immigration pathways have received less emphasis until now. This is a development right here with the travel ban and Trump's crackdown on immigration. Now moving ahead and bringing you probably a breakthrough over to the leaders of Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo, who just signed a peace agreement in Washington on Thursday, aiming to end decades of conflict in eastern Congo, which is an event the White House framed as a major diplomatic breakthrough. Let's take a look.
I think you're going to see very quickly, I think you're going to see things happen. This is something that was not doable, according to a lot of people, and not only is it doable, I think it's going to be a great miracle. These 2 gentlemen are leaders, they're great leaders, and they're going to prove that in the coming months and years, and I think you're going to see very immediate results. I have confidence that that's what's going to happen.
The ceremony offered U.S. President Donald Trump an opportunity to showcase his administration's role in brokering the deal, even as fighting reportedly continued between the Congolese army and M23 rebels in South Kivu. Rwanda's Paul Kagame and Congo's Felix Tshisekedi expressed optimism about the pact, describing it as the start of a difficult but necessary path toward stability. Analysts, however, caution that the agreement is unlikely to bring quick relief to civilians affected by the long-running crisis. The M23 group, on the other hand, did not participate in the Washington talks and is not bound by the deal. The rebels are engaged in separate Qatar-led negotiations with Congo. We see that Thursday's agreement finalizes a framework first, reached in June after months of effort involving the United States, the African Union, and Qatar. It also builds on a previously established regional economic integration framework meant to guide future economic cooperation among the countries. Washington also announced a new bilateral agreement with Rwanda and Congo that will expand U.S. access to critical mineral moves officials say will support economic growth for all 3 nations. That's a breakthrough right there for Rwanda and Congo and even the United States and the world at large. Now moving over to what is happening right here in Kenya with William Ruto and the United States. The United States and Kenya on Thursday signed a 5-year, $2.5 billion health partnership, the first in a series of new America First global health agreements expected under the Trump administration. The deal marks a major shift in U.S. foreign aid policy, which now requires lower-income countries to take on greater responsibility for tackling HIV and AIDS, malaria, tuberculosis, and polio. The agreement replaces multiple programs previously managed through the now dismantled U.S. Agency for International Development. Under the new framework, U.S. funding will move from non-governmental organizations directly to the Kenyan government. Kenya will gradually absorb the cost of health workers initially supported by United States funds. Nairobi has also committed to increase domestic health spending by $850 million over the 5-year period. U.S. officials described the agreement as a model for long-term sustainability in global health assistance. Meanwhile, Kenyan President William Ruto said the partnership strengthens efforts to modernize healthcare equipment, improve delivery of medical supplies, expand the health workforce, and advance universal health coverage. Let's take a look.
Today, we're here to announce the first signing that we're going to have with the first country in the world on our America First Global Health Strategy.
On behalf of the government and people of Kenya, I express profound gratitude to the United States, to President Donald Trump, and to you, Marco, for the commitment of US dollars 1.6 billion to Kenya over the next 5 years. This gesture of goodwill by President Trump on behalf of the American taxpayers reinforce our ongoing mobilization of domestic resources by Kenyans and actors and stakeholders in Kenya to the health sector. And I assure you that every shilling and every dollar will be spent efficiently, effectively, and accountably.
The United States expects several other African countries to adopt similar agreements in the coming days. However, Nigeria and South Africa are not expected to join due to political differences with the Trump administration. But is that supposed to be a criteria? The overhaul has raised concerns across the global health sector, particularly following widespread cuts to maternal care, nutrition, and HIV and AIDS programs after U.S. AIDS dissolution. Now, this is the development right here. We hope that most African nations might be given that opportunity, basically. Now, until next time, this is where we'll be drawing the curtain on today's Flash News. Stay tuned for Horizon at the top of the hour, 6 p.m. I am Tabitha Akro. Have a pleasant day.